to 5 years seems like a long time, but I guess it really isn't a long time in the big scheme of things. I think
I don't think it is. Yeah, because I mean, oftentimes when we get firms like that, where they're saying from the beginning, I just want to learn about it. I'm, not, it's not an immediate change that I want to make, but I want to learn. And we'll help them with identifying a few key things that could really make them more attractive as a seller.
Alan Darby, Jacqueline Martinez, this is the Buyer's Boardroom. Learn the most about who you are today and where you want to be after. Welcome back, friends and family. Here we are. I can't even believe I'm going to say this. Episode 6 of the Buyer's freaking Boardroom. We haven't been canceled. We are out there. We are gaining steam. And I'm particularly excited about this because this is coming off the heels of one of our boardroom mailbag questions. Somebody wrote back a couple days ago or a couple episodes ago, I'd sure love to hear from a seller. Love what you're doing, but I would love to hear a seller's interpretation of your model. And guys, today's that day.
Yeah, no, that was a great idea.
Teacher, Shawn Meade, who has gone through the Alaris process, and happy to say, like everybody that comes through our process, they got an ideal outcome. They were partnered with Whipley, who since has been purchased by Creative Planning, but we got an interview with them today. Alan, this is huge. I'm loving that we've got a little feel from the other side.
Yeah, look, I have done this myself as a seller many years ago when I sold my RA. And so I know what it's like to deal with this, both in the intellectual sense, because there's very much, some brains that have to go and be applied into what does it mean to transact. But let me tell you, it's also an emotional thing to go through too. And as you go through the process, the intellectual and the emotional will fight with one another. And, sometimes one will win over the other, but, we want to address that. And so it's called the Buyer's Boardroom as the podcast. So we want the sellers, who are probably the majority of the listeners on this podcast, to get real life insights from the buyers. But part of that is just hearing from the sellers what they experienced. And so, yeah, we're super fired up to have Shawn on. His partner, Lane, was also a part of that transaction, but we're just going to interview Shawn. And I think he's got a lot of really, really smart things to say about what he went to, and very candid about what he felt as he went through the process. So it should be fun.
We were going to have a lot of time to get into this, and I'm excited for it. But, we were riffing the other day. Sometimes, guys, our listeners, before we get on the phone and riff, pre or post, we start talking about stuff that's happening in the industry, and some of it's fun, some of it's not. And we're like, my God, these little riffing moments are teaching moments. And I wish we could incorporate some of these nuggets into our episodes. So guys, did anything crazy happen this week? Can you talk to me about something you saw that was, wow, I never saw that before, or something that grabbed you?
Yeah, I wouldn't call this one crazy. I would say this is incredibly irritating. How about that? And we deal with this a lot. We're somewhat used to it, but over the years, it's just gotten worse. And it certainly doesn't help from my perspective. And I think Jacqueline would totally agree with this. When we have other advisors, and we won't name the person who we're speaking about here, but when they are out,
just identified that it's one person.
Other advisors, kind of like Alaris, right?
Yeah, another M&A advisor out there, very well known, great reputation. Generally speaking, and they put out a lot of articles about kind of what's going on in the industry, reports about transaction history and multiples and things like that. And so we have a firm that is right near the end of the process. They're under LOI with a buyer. The deal has been agreed to in terms of the math and all the rest. And going back to the time when they really wanted, when they got their offer, they felt that their offer was a little bit less than what they were due. Okay. And so often we have to be, and we're going to talk a lot about this in this episode, about being rooted in reality in terms of what your business is actually worth. And often the only things that get discussed at a cocktail party or at the golf club is a multiple, okay? A number that's thrown about in terms of what their practice sold for. And unfortunately, you have to apply a lot of context to that multiple that you're hearing for you to understand what it actually means. In this particular seller's case, there are a number of meaningful things associated with their business that impair the multiple, okay? And they're totally valid. We've had multiple buyers look at it. They all agree, in terms of that general consensus. Okay, so set that aside. I've got a seller here who thinks their business is worth X, it's worth Y because of a number of very specific factors that are problematic for just about any buyer. Okay, but people are calling him every week, trying to get him engaged with conversations. They find out about the high level aspects of his business, and they're telling him, oh, you should trade it at something substantially higher than what they're likely to receive in this transaction. And so every time we've been handling this over several months, he understands it, and we get back to a place of reality. Well, this M&A advisor writes a report, and in it they're talking about transaction volume being down this year, how multiples have been somewhat persistent. He threw out a couple multiples on transactions that are $1 billion plus. And then he has this little saying in there, however, we had another firm, I think it was $350 million of assets under management, that we were able to secure a 17 times cash flow offer.
Right.
Okay. And Jacqueline, you and I, first thing out of our mouths when we saw that on the surface was, and do you know, I won't say it out loud, but BS, you know what that word is?
Yeah.
It was just, there's zero chance that a $350 million firm received a 17x cash flow multiple in the sense of a regular way transaction. You have to supply the context around that before we can get to anything remotely close to what that firm likely transacted for. So Jacqueline, you see this all the time. When often we have firms that'll come to us and they say, oh, I have a 13x offer, okay? And we're thinking to ourselves, that doesn't sound right on the surface. And we'll ask them, after we're under engagement with them, let us see the letter of intent, which often they don't have a letter of intent. It's more like a email or something like that, where the buyers put some high level stuff in there. And Jacqueline, what is it that, like, we just know going into it that we're likely to see? The first thing.
Well, the first place my mind goes to would be around that there's some sort of growth hurdle needing to be achieved in order to receive the full valuation. Usually it's something along those lines that is required. So it's kind of like that old adage, you tell me the price and I'll tell you the terms. You want to flash this 17x, whatever multiple it is. And that may very well be true, but certain things would need to go really, really well. Likely even well beyond historical growth rates that you've achieved in order to get that full price. Not saying it isn't possible or, that it's not really
but there's no context around it. And here's the problem. Right. Someone with no knowledge of all of the contextual things that might make that statement remotely believable, which I don't believe it, but even for it to be remotely true, a number of things have to be true. And the person who doesn't understand those things, they go around thinking, oh, well, my firm should be worth 17x too. Why isn't it? Okay.
Right.
And so what she said, though, Rick, was the number one thing that we see happen all the time when someone comes in and throws a big multiple at us. In my mind, I'm saying, okay, you're telling me you got a 13x. You probably have more like an 8 or a 9x offer with a 3 to 4 turn offer on a growth earnout. Meaning, the only thing in that valuation that is based on the historic, the way the business is now, is that initial 9x, okay? To get to that 12 to 13, you have to do some things after the acquisition, chiefly grow. Now, that's not implausible, but what is the growth hurdles that they're saying you have to hit for that to be true, for you to actually receive that? Often, the growth hurdles that they have on there are quite more robust than what the firm has been able to do historically. So when one questions whether, it's nice to see it written on paper, I'm going to get a 13x if I grow 30% a year for the next 3 years. My question is, have you grown 30% ever in the history of your previous life cycle? So context around how multiples are framed are another thing. A second thing that's a problem with the way that was worded in that document was, we know what was cash flow. What is EBITDA? Because if I commit, this is what happens a lot of times. So you had $1 million of EBITDA, right?
Right.
And the buyer said, in a normal business, we would say that, okay, that sounds like an 8x valuation. So $8 million. And again, there's no context around that. But what if I came in and said, I'll buy you for 15x EBITDA, right? Well, that sounds awesome. However, in my EBITDA offer, I'm going to adjust your P&L to add in all of these costs that are central, and they may just be justifiable from the buyer's perspective. But my cost allocations, okay, drove your EBITDA, once we adjust it, from $1 million to $500,000, okay? So now I can offer you the same $8 million, but claim it's a much higher EBITDA multiple because I've adjusted the EBITDA down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I get so tired of people quoting me EBITDA multiples and they don't throw the context in it. We sort of expect it from sellers because they just aren't, aware of this. Where I really hate seeing it from is from buyers or from advisors who should know better, because they're they're giving people false hope about what their business is worth, and they need to be. I wish there was some kind of regulation around how we quote multiples so that people could understand exactly what we're talking about. Anyway, so that's my rant. I'm tired of it.
Listen, I didn't see it going this way, but I'm listening, and if I'm getting back to that $350 million person, you just said something and it kind of speaks to me. The acquirers out there should know better. That's one train that's leaving the station. But then you've got these sellers or partners that are looking to partner that have never done this before, that don't know any better, that haven't been learned. And these two trains are colliding. The one that should be, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's making us all look bad, but it's certainly not helping anything. But what I'm hearing is sellers think that is what it is. And
they just hear the
degree.
They immediately plug that to their business. I'll tell you what, if that business was truly 17x and there was something else about it that was totally unique to the situation. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe they had some technology associated with the business that was worth a lot of money. Maybe they had some kind of organic growth engine that the buyer said, hey, we can take this and blow it up around the country. I mean, there's any number of things, but a regular business, and that's what I'm really getting at, is like the standard RIA that we see day in, day out at the $350 million asset size, that's 70 basis points blended fee schedule, so they're on $2.5 million of revenue, 40% EBITDA margins. No chance that they got 17x. Zero chance.
Jacqueline, remind me. So remind me to never ask how your week was without checking on how Alan's week was before we ever do that again. I want to make sure we're coming off a great week, and Alan has nothing good to say. No. Holy smoke.
It's an important message. Yeah.
It is important. Yeah. I'm just like, holy, this is like a whole other episode in and of itself. But it's good information. And again, here at Alaris, all the information helps you make the best decision. So getting back on track, we talked about Shawn Meade, a seller that actually has come through our process and that we help partner with Whipley
right.
Force under creative planning. And I know that if you are listening and you're joining, maybe you're there, maybe you're far from there. This is an episode that I'm excited to hear because, yes, we've given you largely a buyer's lens perspective of what we're doing. But Alan, start us off. Like, how did this come to be? Walk us through the Shawn Meade process.
Yeah, well, Shawn and Lane, they were like a lot of sellers, and that we've actually put a few videos out. Like, what's the frame of mind you should bring to the table when you're thinking about transacting? And, for me, the healthiest frame of mind is, I'll just call it inquisitive exploration. Okay. You don't have to start the process having firmly decided that this is something you're going to do in the near sense, so you don't have to wait to the point in which you just decided, okay, we're selling. Now we're going to start. It's perfectly fine. And Jacqueline, I would say it's just way more normal that a firm is coming into our process specifically, and they don't know. They just don't know because
they don't know what's out there and just want to get educated and
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, the frame of mind that I would encourage you to have is just like be inquisitive, be willing to explore, have an open mind to how things are done. We internally, this goes back to our United days, we call it running downhill. It's if you get started with that general open frame of mind, like, hey, let's just go explore this. We don't know if the time is right for us to do something like this. Could be now, could be 3 years or 5 years from now, but let's at least start with this open mind. And if we see something that we like, it will be obvious to you, right? I mean, Jacqueline, when you say that, like it's as we go through the process and you're hearing what's out there and how this works and what potential partners might look like for you, it's either going to click for you or it's not,
Right.
So in terms of timing. And so that I would say, and Shawn and Lane, I thought did a great job at that. They had some motivations for doing it, which we're going to talk about, but they were just like very healthy explorers, like not overly emotional, very rational, but they were just saying, hey, let's go start the process and see if anything fits.
Well, oh, go ahead.
No, you please.
I was gonna say, what do you think is the ideal timeline before a sale to start connecting with a firm like Alaris?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say at 3 years, maybe as many as 5. Because now you might have that time frame coming into it, and just do it sooner. Again, based on what you learn, if you get into the process and it's like, okay, wow, this is actually something we should consider doing faster. But I would at least start exploring when I can say, hey, I'm probably 3 years away.
Yeah.
From doing something like this. And I'll go one better, Jacqueline. I'll even put an age on it. I would say like the ideal time is around 55, 50 to 55. Yeah. Is what the per time. We have a lot of conversations with people, and hey, if you waited beyond that time frame, don't worry about it. But I'm speaking ideally between 50 and 55 is the perfect time to start exploring that.
So sorry to interrupt you, Jacqueline.
No, go ahead.
Having a rough day. Question though, in that 3 to 5 years, guys, 3 to 5 years seems like a long time, but I guess it really isn't a long time in the big scheme of things. I don't think
it is. Yeah, because oftentimes when we get firms like that where they're saying from the beginning, I just want to learn about it. I'm, not, it's not an immediate change that I want to make, but I want to learn, and we'll help them with identifying a few key things that could really make them more attractive as a seller when they really are ready, and give time to ramp up and make certain changes, and then market. Yeah,
I think that's really what I'm trying to ask. Like in that 3 to 5 years, what are the themes like coming into it that maybe they weren't thinking? What are the themes that actually move people like, oh, yeah, maybe I do need to transact? Are there things that pop up in that 3 to 5 years for most that are common to make them feel like they need to transact sooner than later?
Well, I think there's in my experience, and Jacqueline, you could probably add here too, but like there's like 3 dominant categories of themes. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of the timing, to speak to that one more second, is the 3 to 5 year window, I think is good. Again, now keep in mind, you might get started and decide this is something we want to do quicker, right? And that's not uncommon at all. But I think a healthy time frame is to say is 3 years. Well, why is that? Well, one, it's an educational process. Okay, so you're going to get educated with no pressure, and I think I would start the whole thing about doing it with a 3 to 5 year window, because you never want to wait till you have to do something, right? You want the optionality to be as wide as possible. So starting before it's a requirement for you to do something, and like someone dies, God forbid, or something catastrophic were to happen that forces you to do something. That's why a 3 year head start is a good idea. Next, it's going to take about a year to get a deal done. We'd like to get it done quicker, but that's kind of normal. So starting in a 3 year window, you really have only a 2 year gap of exploration should you decide to pull the plug after you got started. And then finally, as you go through the process of getting educated, and again, we're speaking to ours, but I'm sure others do something similar, you're going to identify things in your business that, hey, if you fixed these things, it might end up in a much better outcome for you, right? And so getting an awareness of what those things are is incredibly valuable to get started, even if you can't say, I'm ready to transact, Okay, so with that, from a seller's perspective, there are three primary buckets of reasons of why they transact. And I'm going to go through them really fast. We don't have the time to unpack them in depth, but it is important for any seller to understand how they weight these things, because it's going to point them to very specific buyers in the marketplace who have built their models to solve the very things that they're trying to solve. Okay. And particularly if it's a multi-partner practice, it's important to know how each one of the partners weights these things, because it's more common when you say, Jacqueline.
Yeah, it could be a big disconnect across
exactly.
The more partners there are, right?
Yeah, the more partners, I would say it would be abnormal if they were all on the same page in every one of these areas.
Right.
It's usually an age difference. One partner is 58, one's 50, one's 35, right? Well, all three of them are not going to come into this with the same primary motivators. Okay, but what are the motivators? So there's three buckets. The first one we call the monetary reasons to transact. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. In that bucket are three items. It is de-risking your asset. So you've built an asset that has tangible value. For many sellers, it's the most significant thing in their life, and it's illiquid. So they want to de-risk that asset. Doesn't mean they want to get out of being an owner entirely, but they would like to take some chips off the table. That's number one. Number two is solving a succession plan issue. So you either don't have the people on the team that will ultimately succeed you, or more commonly, you do have them, but you just haven't figured out the legal or financial pathway to transact. You have a succession problem in either scenario, solving that. And we put it in the monetary group because it has monetary impacts. And thirdly is what we call an expanded economic opportunity. And that's typically someone who, given they don't want to get out of the business, they want to grow up. And so they view partnering with a larger firm is very potentially lucrative, not only in the sense of helping them grow revenue, but enrolling a portion of their valuation into equity. So those are the monetary drivers. The next group would be, we call it quality of life. Quality of life would be really get me out of the stuff that I hate doing, right? So I started this business years ago. As it's grown, I've just found myself doing more and more of what I don't like, not my highest and best use. So help me solve that problem. I want to change how I work. Okay. Next would be expand my capabilities. Okay. So help me be more attractive to clients. Typically, that's by adding more services beyond traditional planning and portfolio management, which are the two foundational services. So what else can you do for me? Tax preparation, corporate trustee, qualified plan expertise, advanced tax planning, this whole myriad of services that perhaps you can bring to the table. And then thirdly would be practice management. Help me manage the team. We've covered this before in another episode, which we haven't released yet. I'm excited about that. But it's get the rainmakers out of non-rainmaking functions, turn generalists and niche specialists, all of those things. And there's a third bucket. Jacqueline, do you want to cover that one?
Sure, around growth. And this isn't for every seller, right? Or I guess to the point of different partners have different priorities, but we will engage with sellers that are looking to grow. They have aspirations of eclipsing that next AUM hurdle, $1 billion, $3 billion, whatever it might be. And they're thinking about the various investments in, say, technology, or maybe it's recruiting, or maybe they want to get into the acquisition space and grow that way. And they want to learn more about that, and thinking about, okay, how can I really fast track my goals here? And the best bet may be to partner with a larger firm that has, if it's technology, that they already have a platform that they can plug into and not go through that change all alone, over to more efficient systems, or tapping into a buyer's M&A team, business development team, if there are advisors in their community that they would love to have them join. It's a lot to think through, and partnering with someone who's been through it before, they can get to those goals quicker. And for many of the national firms, you're receiving equity as part of your valuation. So it's not like you're foregoing the growth altogether by partnering with a larger firm. You're still participating in that in some way, and could be a better outcome by joining forces.
Yeah. So well said. Those are the three drivers: monetary, quality of life, and growth. Yeah. I might tack on just being a part of a larger organization. Some people are tired of being a lone wolf. It's fun to run with people who are all very sharp and fun to be around, and we're all rowing on the same boat, but those three common themes are ultimately, I would put like 90% of what drives firms seeking to partner, their why. Now, again, it's different for everyone. Some firms, it's all about the monetization. Some firms, it's all about the quality of life. Others, it's all about the growth. For most, it's a little bit of each. And so just trying to figure out how you weight those buckets of reasons will really help you towards identifying who is a good partner for you, because their models are oriented to meet those needs.
So staying on growth, guys, I mean, I feel like you kind of touched on growth, but maybe in a more negative way in terms of evaluation and all of that. But sticking with the seller's optics, those of you out there listening or watching, and that the day is coming, I guess just tune into this. When we say growth, I guess the question is, and I think I know a little bit of the answer here, but Jacqueline, if you would, or guys, how do buyers actually help you grow? Now, I understand getting in front of more people, and I think most people, that's where their head goes. But in terms of expectations, and what does that look like to the seller? Are there hooks in that, or are there expectations to grow? And in doing so, does that have like an impact on the service they're providing by, hey, this is where we're focused now? So like,
yeah,
I get growth and it's good, but are there hooks in it that we need to get out there?
I wouldn't see their hooks. We never hear about sales quotas. You must add this many new clients or new assets or things like that. But what the buyer means is growth in their world. They know that, shortly after transitioning, so many things come off of your plate as a business owner, for you, for other key team members that are now done by a centralized team. So without adding a single new client, you're able to, if the buyer has services, like Alan was saying, around, tax prep and estate planning and different types of things that now you can roll out to all of your clients, there could be revenue generating opportunities without adding a single client. And then your capacity is freed up too by offloading certain things to a centralized team. So then it's different. Now there's capacity, and sometimes the buyer firm may have centralized marketing sources, like centers of influence, different ways to engage with those, different direct mail, different newsletters, different webinars on investment topics, just other ways to engage with your existing clients to get referrals from your existing clients and new clients. Just a different world and different way to think about it. It's hard to explain until you're in it and you're part of it and you're realizing the capacity.
Yeah, well, I'd say, as she touched on it, what they don't mean is like adding more hours to your work week, right? That's the thing that I've seen a lot of people, who are largely referral driven, they hear about all the growth opportunities that the buyer can bring to the table. And part of their mind immediately goes to, oh my gosh, they're going to make me work 80 hours a week. And no, that's not what it means. It's, as Jacqueline said, let's get you out of things you shouldn't be doing, create capacity, surround you with resources. And also growth can come in a different way at the advisor level. So it could come from, hey, let's take some of the smaller clients off of your plate, maybe hand them off to some junior advisors. That creates capacity for you to work with more clients you love. It could come from, let's get you out of a client-facing role altogether and focus on mentoring younger advisors. That's growth too. So, so there's a whole different variety of ways we can grow, but by and large, all they want to know is you do want to grow. That's what they don't want to hear. We talked about this in a previous episode, so I won't belabor it, but they really aren't loving that I want to go play golf 4 days a week story. Now, if that's you, that's okay. We just need to find buyers who are comfortable with that, but the vast majority will not be.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So, all right. So we've talked about motivations. And again, we've had a seller come through and we've checked in. We've had all our targeting points, that we're educating them on through the process. Well, what does the process look, guys? I mean, I'm learning it, but for our listeners,
you mean the process that we run our prospects through?
Exactly. To finding a partner, specifically to finding a partner. Can we unpack that a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah. So we prepare them from a total time perspective. I would say from on a minimum 5 months to probably 8-9 months. I said a year earlier. That the variance really has to do with after the LOI is executed, kind of how the buyers run that, how long they take, to run that process. But on a regular way, someone who's hitting on all cylinders, I would say 5 to 7 to 5 to 8 months is an ideal time frame. Now, the way we do it is we break that into 4 distinct phases. And the purpose for that is understanding that a lot of sellers aren't ready to make that decision day one that, yes, we're going to transact. We want to give them multiple off-ramp points, so that they can get an education coming through a part of the process. And then they can say, hey, we'd like to continue going forward, or, now's the time for us to kind of call time out. And so, so it's 4 phases. The first phase is an exploration phase. We call it our ideal outcome phase. And that's where we're educating them about the market, how this works, who the buyers are, what their broad models look like, the pros and cons of each, so there's a big educational component to it. But then, of course, we have to pull data from them, quantitative and qualitative data. So the quantitative data is easy. That's the financials. So we're typically collecting 3 years of P&L, staffing assessments, operation assessments. Want to learn all about your client experience, all that. But then the qualitative data is really where we focus. And that's speaking to what's the primary motivations that we talked on just a minute ago in granular fashion for each partner. And then what's their autonomy profile like? Because that's essentially what this is as an autonomy trade. So we come through, it takes about 1.5 months, 2 months typically to get to that phase. So at that point, it's a go, no-go decision for them. So, that they want to continue, we'll do our buyer discovery process where we're showing them all the buyers and who they essentially match to. The next phase, which is also about a month and a half, we call our deal ready phase. And that is where it's really focused on the economics and making sure that we get that dialed in. So we have a full team of analysts that will take all the data that we've captured. They're going to model it up in a M&A ingestible form that a buyer would want to see. And we're going to produce for them or evaluation, or essentially give them an estimate of what their firm is worth in a regular way transaction, given everything that we learned in the ideal outcome phase, because there's going to be things that, raise your hand, Rick.
This is important. I want to be very clear for our listeners. The first phase, the ideal outcomes phase, are you telling me that the sellers need to wait to get to second phase to have some idea of valuation, or do we?
No, that's a good point. But actually, in the ideal outcome phase, one of the meetings that we have is a very high level valuation. So we'll take data, real data, but it's not the granular P&L data that needs to be produced to provide a buyer. And we will give them a very good estimate of value in that first phase. So probably within week 2 or 3, they're gonna have I call it about 85-90% directionally accurate estimate of value and what their terms would likely be. So good point. Okay, but now we're back. We're in the deal ready phase. That's the valuation. We're completing that, making sure that the P&L is tight. All of their information that a buyer is going to request is all in good order. Okay. Again, if the valuation isn't what they expect, that's a point for them to say now is not the right time. So it's an off ramp again. Now we're going to move to the third phase, which is we call it the dating phase. That's where we're introducing them to buyers that we've already matched them with. So again, our model is we've got 30 to 50 hours with every buyer on our roster, and we can tell you, having gone through all of that work, who you are a fit for and who you're not a fit for. So we're going to match you with buyers, and we're going to start meeting with them. They're going to put forth an indication of interest, and assuming the ones that we run with, we're going to start meeting their team in earnest. So again, it's about another month and a half, lots of meetings between you and your team, assuming they're participating, and the buyer's team. So it's the point where we're making sure the cultural fit is appropriate. And lots of opportunities to meet their team. Also partners who sit out in your shoes once and now are on the other side of the transaction. So you get lots of exposure there. The end of that dating phase is typically a letter of intent. The letter of intent kicks off the fourth and final phase, which Jacqueline and her team leads, which is, what would you say, 45 to 90 days typically, and that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's where we're going back and forth between both sides to walk through the LOI, those nuances we were talking about earlier of what needs to be true for certain payments to be made, and make sure that there's full understanding of the setup, and make sure that certain protections for the sellers and the buyers are in place, so that that there's the outcome that everyone wants to have. And there's certain things that can come up in those phases that are normal, that happen in every deal, that we really try to get ahead of, setting expectations with the seller around what to expect related to those pricing adjustments or things that they may see in the agreements too.
And it's so robust. And again, if you're a seller or potential seller, we're looking through the eyes of someone that's actually gone through our process from start to finish. We're going to have an interview with one that's done to kind of bring all of this together. But Jacqueline, in your ending segment there, you would allude to some of the things that can happen. I'm quoting you, saying there's some things that can happen that you say are sometimes normal. And we throw this term around the office, freak out moments. So I'm going to regret this, but these freak out moments that kind of occur, I think they can probably happen all through the process, whether they're seller born, process born, it's normal, or, in legal docs. Can you guys talk about maybe some of the, yes, this is going to happen moments, and this is what we call them? Can you color that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, as much as we try to prepare, and I'll list like maybe the top 3 to 5 that always come up, but we can never expect everything. And there could be, surprising reasons of things that we think we made clear early on, and it doesn't just quite make sense. Like a common one that I'll see is around how closing adjustments work. You agree to this price based on some multiple of EBITDA, and to us, it's commonplace for not 100% of that to be paid at a closing. Typically there's going to be, it ranges, maybe 50 to 80% that's paid at a closing. And usually that's predicated upon a successful client transition. You're going to your clients, you're getting consents, your new agreements, and you're going through that process before money exchanges hands on a closing date. That can be surprising to folks, and particularly folks that are retaining an attorney that's not really involved in M&A deals in the advisory space too. It can seem really strange to do that. But it is common here because of the regulatory reasons that you need to go to clients and get consent first. So that's a top one that I would see related to the pricing. And then another one would be when you're joining a national firm. A lot of times their private equity backers will require them to do a quality of earnings assessment on the EBITDA. So we do our valuation. That's what the buyer put their LOI together around. But once that LOI is signed, that kicks off a quality of earnings assessment where we have various accountants that are going in and ticking and tying every single number. And that can generate a difference in EBITDA from what was originally projected. Sometimes it's higher, not a bad outcome, but sometimes it is lower. And yeah, I think being ready for that. Let's see, another one. The other one I was thinking was around at-will employment. Like a lot of times the seller will have this worry, what if we have our closing and then the next day they let me go and they replace me with somebody who makes a fraction of what I do, and goes down this rabbit trail of what ifs. And the flip side of it, as we know from our correspondence and connections with buyers, is that's an equal fear on their side. Okay, once you get this check, particularly for larger deals, what is really your incentive to come and continue to grow this business? put our math together, our projections together around certain growth hurdles that you've achieved in the past, continuing at a minimum. And what if you aren't really engaged after that event either?
They think they wrote them that $30 million check or whatever it is just for the asset, the business. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like, that is a part of it, but they're investing in the team.
Right.
And they want to make sure the buyer is freaked out that the team is going to not be there, and so as she mentioned, sellers get nervous that they're somehow going to get fired by the buyer after the transaction for some scheme to, improve profits. This is the exact opposite. The buyers want nothing to do with that. In fact, if anything, they want you to be under an employment agreement for a long period of time as is enforceable.
Okay, underlining an important safety tip for sellers listening today. When you partner or transact with a larger firm, they want you to stay. They want your team to stay. They do not want you to leave. Just
right.
Underline that, guys.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, like having an at-will employment setup, which is common with a lot of them, especially within national acquirers, but really a lot of acquirers. And having an at-will agreement, meaning that you can leave at any time, with some notice. They could let you go with some notice. That's not an indication that they don't want you to stay for as long as you want to be working, or that they have some intention of letting you go after the close. It's just more about how their acquisition program is set up, and theoretically needing the most flexibility from an enterprise value standpoint, that they could make changes if there was a bad actor or some reason to make a change.
All right.
Yeah.
So those are freakouts, and they're to be expected. I guess that's the thing. Like, there's going to be bumps on the road, just like any great relationship. And we get out in front of them. So we say, hey, I told you this was coming, and here we are, or this could happen. So I think Alaris does a really, really good job of navigating that. I'm kind of excited what's coming next, guys. We finally get to present one of the sellers that have come through our process. Alan, I just want to let you take us there. Why don't you walk us through what we're about to get into?
Yeah, so Shawn Meade, formerly of Redwood Wealth out of Atlanta, Georgia, is going to come in and spend a few minutes with me just talking about how he and his partner Lane came to the conclusion that seeking a partnership was probably something they wanted to explore. Their emotional frame of mind, their intellectual choices that they made, and how they vetted the partnership opportunity, and then just kind of share his journey on what happened. Good and the bad, would he do it again, what life is like on the other side. So I think it's a really, other than the fact that I'll just tell everyone now, the guy's an Ohio State Buckeye fan, so we have to deal with that. In the background, he's got this big Ohio State thing going behind him. But other than that, it's a fantastic interview from a guy that I found to be, a real straight shooter, highly intellectual. You look back at the list of firms that we've helped to come through this process, definitely up there amongst our favorites. So I think that everyone's going to really enjoy listening to Shawn share his story. Okay, welcome Shawn Meade, formerly of Redwood Wealth in Atlanta, Georgia. You an esteemed Ohio State Buckeye fan, as you can see by looking at your shirt. Sorry about that.
That just gives me more credibility.
That's right. With everyone in Ohio for sure. Well, not everyone in Ohio. Okay, so we have this podcast, Shawn, called The Buyer's Boardroom, and the basic gist of it is to give like a behind-the-scenes look for firms, let's call them sellers in this scenario, that are considering a partnership, and hopefully educating them a lot, talking about things that they may be concerned with, that they don't like asking questions or don't know where to go to get the answers to. We want to kind of give them this behind-the-scenes look at how buyers handle the M&A process, the things that they're looking for, red flag issues, things like that. And you are our very first seller that I have had on the show. So congratulations. If Ohio State can't be number one, you can be number one, buddy.
We can be number one at something.
That's right. So you and your partner, Lane, worked with Alaris. It's probably about 2 years ago, I think, if my timing is right, give or take. Yeah.
It would have been early 2020.
Yeah. So we're sitting here now all in the summer of 2023. So almost 3 years now. So,
Yep.
And so you came to us through our normal marketing outreach as we were knocking on doors every week, trying to have these conversations with prospective sellers. And, we hit it off with you and Elaine right away, I thought, although you were very thoughtful about, as you entered the process with us and had a lot of great questions. But why don't you just take a moment and share, like, what got yourself and your partner, Elaine, even to the point, I mean, because you're young. How old are you, Shawn?
51.
51. So it's 3 years ago. So you're 48 or so back then.
Yep.
And so a lot of gas in the tank. You've built a very successful practice. Nothing was wrong. I think you would agree with that. Nothing was wrong with the practice.
No.
But what got you to the table, you and Elaine, to the table of saying, hey, let's consider partnering via acquisition?
Okay.
In my mind.
Great question. So, Lane and I have been doing this for a long time, and we really love what we do. We love working with clients. We love helping them, achieve all their goals, all that kind of stuff. The issue is, as you grow a firm and a business, is that it takes up more and more time. And I got to the point where, I was doing tax returns and I was filling out unemployment forms and, Fulton County tax things. And it's just all the stuff that as a business owner, you end up having to do. And I just got sick of it.
Yeah.
I came to Lane one day and said, hey, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. And we need to figure something out. So truthfully, it's kind of interesting. He actually, in his style, he actually started keeping a log of, what things that he do every day that took up time, responding to the bank about something or the payroll company or this HR issue or, whatever it was. And after about a month, he was like, wow. He's like, I spend a lot of time doing all these things. And, I was a compliance officer and I went through an SEC audit. I think we had an unemployment audit. We had all these different things that had gone on in the previous 6 to 12 months. And I think that's kind of what threw us over the edge. And I remember having a talk with you at one point, what is your best use of time? If you could pick, what are you going to do all day, every day that you enjoy? It's not going through an SEC exam. It's not, calling the payroll company. Yeah, it's not calling the payroll company because they screwed up your payrolls, somehow. It's all that kind of stuff. So we had actually started talking to a couple firms even before we talked to you. And, they started telling us, hey, well, that's stuff that we would take over and we would do all that stuff for you and you wouldn't have to worry about any of that. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool. So, and then when we started to get a little more serious, we're like, well, we probably need to hire somebody because we really don't want to go into this transaction, just figuring this out on our own. But that's kind of where it all started. It was just all that extraneous, stuff.
Just the reality that, as you build a successful business, that's come and you have full control, you
Right.
like this shareholders have control, but that often comes at a price. It comes with a burden.
It does. And, and it's easier when you're 32 and it gets a little harder when you're 48 and, your kids are older and, you want to do things and spend more time with them. And, there's literally 2 to 3 weekends a year where I would have to spend the entire weekend working on our tax return. I'd have to prepare our financial statements and, pull everything together for all those kinds of things. And that's not enjoyable, and you can't really do it. It's hard to do it during the week, during the day, because you're dealing with client stuff and you're running the firm and managing people and, doing all that. And at the end of the day, you have to file a tax return.
Yeah.
So,
One of the gentlemen I just interviewed a few weeks ago, Pat McLean, co-CEO of Allworth, the way he describes it is, you start in the business to serve clients and deliver wealth management planning, portfolio management to clients and do a great job. And then you're almost like an accidental entrepreneur. And you wake up one day and you have this business and people that you're responsible for. And that side of the ledger just gets larger and larger and larger and tends to dominate, and you find yourself, and this classic Lane, your partner, for those that don't know Lane, he's very analytical, and to actually go through and track where he was spending his hours.
Yep.
One sounds just like him, but two is very smart, to do, because people just don't. You're actually so busy, you don't know where you're spending your time. You get to the end of the day and it just got lost. So okay, right. So that's what motivated you. So let me ask you this question. So you made the decision to at least explore and find out what a partnership meant.
Right.
Going into that decision, what were some of the biggest, I'll say fears, maybe concerns is a more proper word, but like what was weighing in the back of your mind that was maybe thinking, okay, do we really want to do this? Like what was the biggest fear? Can you kind of walk us through your state of mind there?
Sure. So the biggest fear is when you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of giving up control. So, you start a business, you build a business. We used to be able to have meetings and we could literally make a decision and change something right there. When you go work for a larger firm, that can't happen. So it's, and we knew that going into it, but you have to, if you don't want to do the tax return, the compliance and all the other stuff, you have to give up something. So, so we knew going in that we were going to have to give up control. We knew that, we were going to be accountable. We were going to be part of a team now. It wasn't just going to be the two of us. And so we didn't really know how that was going to work, Then we go merge with another firm that was only 20 people, or do we go merge with a firm that had 500 people? There's different levels there, and you have to decide kind of where you want to fit in. So that was a big thing. Part of it was, you want to find a firm that has similar investments, because you don't want to go in and tell your clients, hey, we've been investing this way for 15 years and we've suddenly decided, well, we're not going to do it that way anymore because we're merging with this firm and we think this is better. That doesn't sound good. So we want to find a firm that had similar investments. We knew that. So we knew most of the stuff. I have a lot of friends here in Atlanta that work at and own their own firms, and I had talked to a lot of them over time, and a lot of them had given me insight. This is what you need to look out for. This is what you need to, think about. That kind of stuff. So that was helpful. And, I've always been in study groups with a lot of people, and, I've seen firms get acquired and merge and so forth. So I had at least had some of that experience coming into it. But I think as an entrepreneur, it's the control.
It's the control. Absolutely. And we, we deal with that all the time at Alaris, and helping entrepreneurs think about what does control really mean at the end of the day. And right. As you remember, we break it into, we call it the autonomy trade-off, and there's 6 areas of decision-making: strategic, financial, your staff, the client experience, which is your portfolio management and your planning recommendations, your calendar, and your growth profile. So we unpack all of those areas in granular fashion. And what I generally find is that entrepreneurs are quite happy to divest the strategic decision-making, the financial decision-making, which is the operations and all the rest. So you didn't fight over giving up compliance, right? I'm sure that perfectly fine.
I was very clear that I wanted nothing to do with that going forward.
Exactly. The areas that they're most concerned about, which makes sense as planners who have a fiduciary responsibility to the clients, is the client experience. You don't really want people telling you what to recommend to your clients in a variety of different areas. And so, and then I think also throw in there your calendar. You're used to coming and going, and you don't want all of a sudden to have to punch a clock. And if you want to work remotely or take a vacation, you have to get permission. So those were your fears. Now tell me, on the other side of it, did the fears come true? Have you largely realized that those giving up control isn't as bad as it seemed?
It takes getting used to.
Yeah.
It's not as bad. Nobody micromanages me on a day-to-day basis. And I think, at the end of the day, if you have a book of business and you have clients, I think people realize that, you kind of know what you're doing and you know how to manage them. And, maybe if I leave early one day at 3 or 4 o'clock, well, that's balanced out by the fact that I may take a client out to dinner on Saturday night for 3 hours.
Right.
So, once you hit a certain point in your career and that you can be successful, you just have to keep, doing that kind of stuff. So, maybe one week I might only work 40 hours, but another week I might work 60. I was in Charleston recently, and I drove over there. I met with 3 clients, and I spent a lot of time, and that's eats into my quote unquote personal time. But I know that's what I need to do.
Yeah,
I was very excited that I have not done pretty much anything with compliance. We did our merger. I have not, built a financial statement. I have submitted anything to to a CPA. I've done very little HR stuff, all that stuff I was hopefully expecting, and that pretty much has come true. So, that's what you're seeking. You're trying to
do. So, as you say, it's taken a bit of adjustment, which might make sense, but largely the things that you really cared about in terms of control, it sounds like you have a great deal of latitude and autonomy still to function and operate the way you please.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You still have, I used to be the compliance officer, so I kind of knew what was compliant, what was not, and I didn't have to get approval from anybody. But now I do have to do that. You just have to follow, some protocols.
But no one's calling you up saying, "Hey, we need you to recommend this investment strategy or financial plan." That's largely not happening.
No. Yeah. I mean, especially if you go to a bigger firm, they usually will have a variety of different, investment options, and, you can pick and choose for what the client needs. Not everybody needs, certain things, and some clients may want alternatives and other clients may not. And it is kind of nice if you're at a bigger firm, you can have access to that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So, you have more arrows in your quiver is what I always like to say. So, as a bigger firm, I can go into a meeting now and have a lot more available to the client, which is better for the client.
Sure. Makes you more attractive to potential clients as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about this. So one thing that business owners, when they're going through this process, you have a business to run, right? And so there's, how big of a distraction was going through this process? Because I remember, as you mentioned, you were already talking to a couple of firms when we showed up, and then of course we introduced you to a number as well. How much of a distraction was this to go through?
It is a big distraction. So, because if you want to take the time to do the due diligence and to talk to all the right people, first off, how many firms you're going to talk to, how many, different, people do you want to, and I think we ended up kind of having a list of 10. Then I think we narrowed it down to like 3, and then we narrowed it down to 2. And when we narrowed it to 2, we ended up going, visits, and we went to their home office and flew up there and, met with people. And, that does take time. So it was definitely somewhat of a distraction.
Yeah. So. And that I encourage sellers, to just be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully yeah, well, of course you want we want to expose you to the maximum amount of potential partnership opportunities, but also if we're doing our job, we've learned everything that you're looking for. We already know that from the buyers, so we can hopefully accelerate that process. But there's no way around it. You've got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and put in the work to make sure you're getting this partnership right, because you're only going to do your transaction once, presumably, and you want to make sure you get it right. So, well, let me ask you this: what was the most frustrating part of the process? And you can answer for yourself, and maybe Lane would have a different answer. But if you know what his was, I'd love to hear this too.
Frustrating. Yeah, it wasn't frustrating. It took time, obviously. So you still have you still have to take care of your clients. You still have to, run your business. And so I wouldn't call it frustrating, but it was just, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time that you got to put in extra. And in the beginning, you kind of do it behind the scenes because you don't really want the employees to find out like too early.
Yeah.
Because then they get upset and scared and whatever. So in the beginning, we had to do this all without telling them. And then you start and the other firms start asking for, items and due diligence and questions and things. And as partners, we had to do all that ourselves. We couldn't get anybody to help us do that. So, it takes time. Like you said, you got to roll up your sleeves and just kind of do it. So
that's a great segue.
It was just time.
Just time. Yeah, I get it. And there's everyone who's listening to this, if you ever go through a transaction, you will come to, we call it deal fatigue. There's a point in the process where you just kind of like, all right, we've got to land this plane.
I think you did that. We were really close there at the end, and you brought in like one more buyer, and
yeah,
I'm
like no,
I don't really think I want to talk to them because we were pretty far along with 2 or 3 of them already. And
that's right. Okay, well, you touched on something that was the staff. That was actually my next question. So, this is a general statement. Well, we encourage sellers to get it on the table as soon as possible with the staff, and your definition of soon is going to be your own. But in general, you don't want to wait to the very end and then spring it on them after the decision has been made, because then they feel like they're done too. But I want to know, how did your staff react? Like when you first broke the news to them, what was their general reaction?
So we had a kind of a standing monthly staff meeting, and we made the decision to tell them when we had narrowed it down to 2 firms. So we didn't tell them who the 2 firms were, and we didn't, go into any specifics. We just told them that, Lane and I had got to the point where we were looking to merge, and we weren't looking to retire. We still wanted to work, but we wanted to merge so we could get out of doing all that other stuff, and we could provide more services and so forth to our clients. So, and I have a lot of friends who've done this, and the staff never takes it well, because the first thing in their mind is they're scared. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
So, you really just have to sit there, and you have to be prepared to answer a lot of questions. And, it's not a fun experience, to be honest, because you have to tell them this, and, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And, so then, of course, for the next 2-3 weeks, they tried to figure out who the 2 firms were, and they would, ask questions every day, and well, how big are they, and where are they based, and that kind of stuff. And, we tried not to, answer too many of those things. And then, so we had gone and visited the first firm, and we hadn't told them. By the time we visited the second firm, we had told them. And so then they were trying to figure out where we were flying, and it was kind of like a game. So, at the end of the day, it's the initial shock. They eventually settle down, a little more, and you just have to be honest with them and say, look, your job's not going to change. You're still going to work with clients. If you work with clients, you're fine, because, no firm is going to acquire you and then get rid of people that work with clients. So
I think you said it. You said exactly what I was going to say. Like that's the thing that well, we have this conversation sometimes where the seller asks us to talk to their staff and give them the lay of the land, so to speak. And that's the first thing that we start with is like, please understand, it is a massive war for talent out there. The last thing that the buyer wants to do is lose talented people.
Right.
Certainly in our business, because the revenues attributed to the business are directly tied to the people in the business, and they don't want to disrupt that or give any reason for a client to potentially leave over a person that they've come to know and trust no longer being there. So they want to stay. If anything, it can be a career expansion opportunity.
Yes. Because that's the problem. We were a smaller firm, and in a smaller firm, there's not as much career potential.
Right.
You may get stuck doing 3 or 4 different things, and you may not like one of them. If you go into a bigger firm, if you decide you want to do one thing and you want to pigeonhole yourself more, you have that ability, and a larger firm gives you the ability to do that. So it was also good that we told our people about it, because then when we kind of got to the final stage where we picked who we wanted to merge with, and we started having to prepare, all the due diligence, we had to go back and forth. It's great to have your staff actually help you do that.
Is it? Yeah. And I think it's great. I don't know if you did this, I can't recall, but once you narrowed it down to the 2, did they interact with the 2 partners? 'Cause sometimes they can be helpful at actually seeing things that maybe you didn't see. Giving their
they did not interact with the 2. They started to interact when we got down to the 1. When we kind of made our
Elaine made that decision,
right?
And that's when you opened up the.
They did ask, and maybe thinking back, maybe we could have involved them maybe more in that decision, and we chose not to. But at the end of the day, it impacted Lane and I the most. So we tried to make that decision ourselves, and then they did interact with the firm at that point.
Got it. Okay. How did the clients take it? What were the clients' reaction initially?
Truthfully, that wasn't too bad. The clients, at the end of the day, clients work with people that they like and that they know and that they trust. And, I've been working, some of my clients go back 20 years, and they really, they weren't, they didn't have any issues with it for the most part. They just want to know, hey, they ask, a lot of simple questions. Are my accounts going to move?
Mm-hmm.
Are my fees going to change?
Yep.
Are you still going to be there? Are you going to invest differently? Are there going to be, new service offerings? Those are kind of all the questions you get. And we were able to answer all those pretty easily. And in our first merger, everybody came right over.
Uh-huh.
So it was fairly easy. And we haven't even talked about this, but we did get acquired 6 months later.
So I think it's fine to say that because all history can go look this up. But so Redwood was acquired by Whipley Advisors, who was subsequently acquired by Creative Planning.
Correct.
A member of the creative planning team. So that honestly, that was the first time in my career that it happened so quickly for a not 2 transactions like that. So the
second transition was a little more difficult because I thought we just had this conversation. So we had to have the same conversation again, talk to them about it again. And for the most part, it worked out fine. It puts a little uncertainty in the client's, situation perspective. But, if you have a good relationship with your client and you're taking care of them and you're doing the things you're supposed to do, then it's not a big issue.
Well, look, as a testament to yourself and Lane and your team to go through 2 transactions, literally with probably 18 months or so after you did the first one. And still to have such a high retention rate. So that's great. That's highly abnormal for everyone listening. But they made it.
We were not expecting that.
I'm sure. Okay, well, last question for you. So, have there been any surprises, good or bad, post the transaction?
So, I guess this
other than the second acquisition, that a big one,
right? The surprises are on the good side. You have for my firm, small $300 million firm with 8 people. Now we work for creative planning, which is 2,600 employees, and we have every service under the sun. So for certain clients, that's a great value add that I could never have provided that at Redwood because we just didn't have the capabilities, didn't have the staff, we didn't have the size. So it's definitely a plus for the clients, especially as we get more integrated and learn more and more about the firm. So, that's the thing. And at the end of the day, we all do this business because we enjoy working with clients and we like offering, services to our clients and helping them. So in my eyes, a larger firm is better for that perspective.
Yeah.
So, the downside, it's a lot of work. So, we had to, it took us a while to find the firm we wanted to merge with, and you got to do a lot of work. Well, then we started the transition process, and that's big, because you have to transition your clients onto all the new platforms.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work involved, and it takes time. It's just, you just have to kind of get to that other side, and we're almost there. We're getting close.
Yeah. Well, it's when we talk about the transition itself, there's just no way to sugarcoat it. It's a massive pain in the rear, but it does end. It's like a finite period of time, and then you get to the other side, and life is as I said, Peter Maluk, cleaner, food tastes better. In your case, wine tastes better.
Exactly. So Peter Maluk is very honest when he talks to us about getting acquired, and he basically says the first year is going to suck.
Yeah,
just be ready for it, but you just have to get to the other side. So, and we're getting there. So. And wine helps with that, definitely.
Wine does help with that. I know you just came back from Italy, right?
I did. I did not have a bad bottle of wine in Italy.
Well, fantastic. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you, Shawn. Thanks for opening up and being willing to share about your experience. And it was a pleasure working with you and Lane, going through that process a few years back. And I just want to tell you, I very much appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
No problem. You helped us a lot, man. That was something that we needed, and we're not experts at everything, so we needed someone to kind of guide us through all that, and that's what you did. So,
all right,
good, bro.
I'll let you go. Have a wonderful day. Go Noles. Go Buckeyes.
Well, it's about time we had a seller come through. That was a great interview. I really enjoyed that, and I hope viewers, I would watch that again because I think it really, really drives home from a seller's point of view what we what we're really, really proud of, the work product that we do. So I'm really, really glad we had the opportunity to listen to their story, Alan. So really, really nice interview. Guys, now it's time for the Alaris Boardroom mailbag. Our email address, and we want them all from you, old and new. boardroom@alarisacquisitions.com. That's boardroom@alarisacquisitions.com. Please write in with your compliments, your questions, your answers, things you want to know more about. We will read them on a future episode. Today's email comes in mailbag. Where do transactions normally fall apart? Do you see it coming? So specifically, they want to know.
Do we see it coming?
The underline.
Yeah.
Do we see it coming before it happens is the question.
So, well, I guess it would depend on the lens, like which direction, because there's two parties in this transaction, and either one of them can be the reason why it ends up blowing up. I would say that, it is a rare thing when we don't see it coming. When you say Jacqueline, I mean, sometimes we get surprised.
I would say that's usually like when it's a lie of omission. Like they have something really hairy that they don't talk about until we're very far along.
Yeah. Like, well, I'll give one example. This is years ago. We're literally in the conference room getting ready to sign the letter of intent. And the compliance officer walks out for a moment, and then one of my partners comes to me and he says, "Did you know they were under SEC investigation?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because that's not disclosed anywhere. They have to tell you that.
Are you making that up?
No, it's a real story. And like, we had spent months and months of hard work, really gotten to know this team, really cool guys from that perspective. But they didn't think it was appropriate until LOI to tell us they were under SEC investigation. So that was an example of something that just totally caught us off guard. But we normally see it coming because from the seller's perspective, they walk away generally over emotion or irrational fear or personality conflicts, fear of losing control. Fear was probably used in 3 of those descriptions. So it's just mental things that cause them to say, you know what, I just can't do this. That's it. And of course we can see that. So early on in the process, it's kind of like dating someone. When you're going on your first few dates, usually everyone's on their best behavior. The more time you spend with them, little things start getting out, attitude, impatience, cockiness, whatever it is, so we generally, because we spend so much time with the sellers, we just know like this is going to be a problem. Like we had one recently, wherein it was a woman and great person, great firm. But like, as we were bringing them through our process, she kept wanting to circumvent the steps. Like we have a very linear progression that we run, and it's been in close to 100 acquisitions now, going all the way back to our United days. It works, and we don't like skipping steps. And so, but she was I think she was very controlling, maybe distrusting, and she wanted to say, no, we're not doing this. We'll do it this way. And that caused us to say, hey, this is going to be a person that might be a problem for the buyer, later on.
Like long term.
Long term. So I got on the phone with that CEO and told him, I just want to let you know that this person, although it's a great practice, no red flags, they are disrupting. They're not listening. They're not listening and taking direction in the process. And I just want you to know please make sure you vet that aspect of your level of comfortability with her before you move forward, because I don't want that on the other side to come back and bite us. Mm-hmm. And I think a little bit of that is happening with that specific one, by the way. But and then from the seller's perspective, I would say the buyer's perspective, like when they blow up, it's usually they just don't know what they're doing. Frankly, like, they don't know how to run a proper cadence. They don't understand that deal fatigue is a real thing. and when to pick up on when your seller is getting to a point of having deal fatigue. You know, they take too long in between meetings. They'll let the deal marinate, as we like to say. So to me, that's, or like this one, Jacqueline, you'll know, I'm not going to say who it was, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. They get to a point of like letter of intent. They sign the letter of intent and they don't call them anymore. Like they just hand them off to their
doesn't call her
team.
Like the CEO with the seller, you know, or the main deal person with the seller, keeping that personal relationship going.
It's like they don't feel loved anymore. Like they got to the point, hey, we signed the LOI, and it's like a checked box. You just go into the transition phase, and they stop talking to them. And there might not be anything to say, frankly. In some phases of the post LOI process, don't need a lot of communication, but like, I would still pick up the phone and say, hey, Rick, I know there's not much to say this week, but just want to let you know we're still super excited about you joining the team. You know, whenever.
I would go as far as to say that phone call would mean more than all the other ones when you were fishing.
Definitely.
I would go as far as to say that would make me happier.
Yeah, most of the national buyers understand this. That's why they do so many transactions, because they're good at it. Some of the regional ones that are, you know, the $2 to $10 billion firm that are trying to get there, often they need a hefty education here. Like, it ain't over yet, you know, like, and even like, think about that. That's like an indicator of what life is going to be like on the other side with you. So care about them, even though they haven't signed officially, they've got an LOI done. Hey, we still need to be engaging with them and making them feel important, because the seller is, you know, we talked about freak out moments. They're definitely in their highest probability of freak out is in that LOI to signing the definitive docs. And so making sure that they are cared for during the period.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like, it's diligence. It's, you know, it's boring. There's so much detail, so much information being requested. You're tired. Then you couple that with, you know, your attorney in your ear doing their job, pointing out where all of this could go badly for you in the documents. It's just a perfect storm if there isn't that personal relationship being maintained, and knowing that there's good people on the other side that just want to get past all of this and get back to growing and move forward. Yeah.
Last question. I really like this one, and this resonates with me with all of the, you know, initial conversations that I'm having with buyers, whether they're, you know, 50 million, 100 million, 300 million, all of them. I think when we talk about the buyers that have engaged us and how big they are, I don't have to tell you guys, it's amazing to me with these beautiful practices that we talk to, these very successful businessmen and women, they feel that they're too small. So here's a question that we just got, and I hear it all the time. I hear this team, I'm 300 million and think no buyer would be interested in me because my firm's too small. And that blows my mind, guys. Talk to me.
Yeah. Now, look, well, it really depends on the buyer, of course. There are buyers who would say that firm is too small for them, but they would be in the minority. Okay, I would say most strategic national buyers, which do the majority of that transactions, they're hunting on the low end, call it 200 million to 2 billion. You know, that's I would say the sweet spot for most of the stuff that you see reported on is probably 300 to 700 million in that range. So no, you're not. But also assets is a very poor way of looking at it. It's more revenue driven. You know, I could show you a firm that's doing with 200 million of assets that does more revenue than a firm with 300, you know, so it's probably revenue driven. And it's really who the buyer we're talking about. So like, if you're talking about a permanent source of capital, like a private equity group, they're minimum like $1 billion. Yeah. Like they want to be in that $2 to $10 billion size predominantly. But hey, there are plenty of regional buyers out there. They'll buy a $50 million firm. You know, they know that they need to get a lot of at bats done, and they're willing to play in a smaller pond until they can get up into that $500 million size. So
yeah.
Thank you for writing in every.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, Jacqueline. No, please.
I was just going to say, there's sometimes there's some specific succession planning issues in a market too. So it could be serendipitous to be able to join a larger firm. You happen to be in the backyard of an office that they have that they're looking for a next leader. There could be opportunities there, even below that 200 million as well.
Like we did one of those. It was a firm with a national firm that probably wouldn't have been on their radar as like a standalone anchor acquisition, but it happened to be right next to one of their larger offices. And so that firm was able to transact and get what we call tucked in to that firm. So a great contact, Jacqueline.
So much to learn in buying, selling, being acquired. Am I attractive to them? Do I find that they're attractive? And it seems, I'm so glad we're here to provide this education for those that are listening. Guys, this is going to do it for another episode, and it's been a great one. Again, from the seller's point of view in the buyer's boardroom. Very, very beautiful interview. Thank you for joining us. Remember, boardroom@alarisacquisitions.com, boardroom@alarisacquisitions.com. We will read your questions in future episodes. Once again, thank you on behalf of Alan Darby, Jacqueline Martinez, the ones that make our M&A world go round here at Alaris, the Zen masters of our world. We will see you at the next episode. Bring your friends, bring your family. We got plenty of room. See everybody.
See you guys.
Hey guys, see you soon.
Bye.